Welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast, where brave people share their story to inspire others in what's possible. I'm your host, Megan Babcock, and I'm the founder of It's Your Story to Tell and the Coach Collective. I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest, Robyn. We're going to be talking about the difficulties of adoption, being an immigrant, experiencing abuse, and being raped. These are difficult topics, and we want you to take care of yourself while listening. We also want to acknowledge the pain, heartache, darkness, or desperate place that you might be finding yourself, because it's really hard to walk through these types of things. If you or someone you know are in this place, we want to encourage you to seek help. If support is needed right away, please call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Before we jump in and start to hear from Robyn about her story, I just want to tell you a little bit about her. Robyn and I met recently through a really great friend that we have, Julie. And we've just gotten to know each other through some of our ministry organizations and things that we do to support our state and things that are going on here. And we just got to meet in person for the first time at an event in February where we were celebrating Oregon's birthday. So it was such a pleasure to meet you in person. And I'm really thankful that you're willing to share your story with our audience. Robyn is a pastor's kid, and she's always loved God and people. She made some mistakes, who hasn't, that led to darkness, which also led to an abusive relationship. Been there, done that, so I get it. You became pregnant as a result of a rape, and you chose life for your son, which ultimately led to choosing life for yourself. And so I'm really thankful that you are going to share how you kind of navigated all of that and how you've been using it. So we're going to have Robyn for 2 episodes. And in our second episode, she's going to talk to us about the work that she does as an advocate and in her organization that she started. She's also a pro-life speaker and endorsed by Dr. James Dobson. And she's a owner and writer of Brewed GRIT. She is a political advisor. And like I said before, she was adopted. She was an immigrant to America. And so all of those things come with challenges to navigate. So thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your story and how God has redeemed those hard things and that you're using them to make a difference.
Well, thank you for having me and inviting me on. It's always nice talking with you.
Well, let's just jump in and you start wherever in your story you feel called to share. And I'm going to just ask you some questions or chime in all along the way. So,
Well, for me, it was, I was adopted at a young age. That was a miraculous story in itself. And I was adopted into a white family, but I have never felt out of place with my family. I can't imagine having a family other than them. And growing up in a small town church in Lakeside, Oregon, along the coast, I really loved life. I loved God and I loved family. But the funny thing is there was this, I remember growing up reading the Bible and I always saw these key things of these people that were on great paths. And I was like, they let that mess up what was going on. And I was like, I'm never going to be like that. And we just don't make those kinds of promises rather than like knowing that we're all fallible, basically.
yeah.
And we are all subject to making mistakes. And by the grace of God, each day, may we walk in alignment with Him. And so went to college, had a great first year at college. And my second year, my want for a boyfriend so bad superseded my surrender to having him as my first and my only, and everything in God's timing. And you never live a life so righteous or so well that you can play with sin and come out untouched. And that's the best way I would describe the way that, like, it was the first guy I'd ever kissed. It was the first a lot of things. And you can't compare your exploratory whatevers with someone else's and be like, oh, well, as long as I don't explore as much as these people and I get back on the path, everything will be fine. But life and sin and temptations do not promise that. You don't know where things will go when your decisions take you from being under that umbrella covering of God. And so I would say that's the best way that it describes the way I entered a tumultuous journey was in doing that. And then when I did want to get out of that wrong relationship, it was too late to just safely get out. It wasn't one where you could just break up because it was very abusive. It was very forced. And so when I tried to break up, that was when my wrists and ankles were duct taped, and I was on his apartment room floor, and he heated a metal spatula up on the stove top, and he put a bowl of water in front of my face, and he sizzled it in front of my face, and he was like, imagine how hot that'd feel on your skin. And that was when I tried giving back my engagement ring and just calling everything off. And then it was later on when I said that I didn't want to be having sex anymore that I was raped. And the thing was, though, I was at wit's end with everything, and I just wanted everything to end. I still believed that I would go to heaven, and I believed it wasn't the unpardonable sin. And so around the time that I was very suicidal, I found out that I was pregnant with my son. And I had this new drive within me, this new everything. And I was like, I want to protect this precious life within me at all costs. And so in turn, protecting his life, he protected mine. And then that is where mine and my son's story started together. And then later on, I was able to safely flee and get out of that relationship and went home and lived with my parents for a couple years before God brought a wonderful man into both of our lives. And now we're here in his hometown in the Dalles, Oregon, and now my parents are here from Minnesota. But yeah, it was a very abusive relationship in every single way, physically, sexually, mentally, verbally. And healing takes time. Like, if you're in that situation or have been in that situation, make your exit plan, but don't be hard on yourself that it can take a while to get back to who you are. Because for me, like, I logically knew the contrast of who I was before and then who I was at that time. And I couldn't just flip a switch and become myself the next day. It takes a journey. And people like us, we understand that journey, and just, allow grace for yourself to grow and heal in that.
Such good advice. Wow, I'm really sorry that you had to walk through that. And I'm so thankful that you did have a relationship with God and you had truth that you knew that was carrying you forward. And then when it was such a dark place, that the Lord brought something that into your life that He knew would give you life and give you the ability to move forward in a different way. And what a beautiful gift to come out of that, with not only your own safety, but the son that He blessed you with. So I know that a lot of times that's a hard decision for people who become pregnant in a violent situation. And I don't know, do you have any, just thoughts about how you kind of navigated that? Was it just something that you knew, like, it doesn't matter? Walk us through a little bit when you found that out, kind of what went through your mind.
A lot of things went through my mind. I I've always grown up with that. People are people, no matter their background or experience. We value people. My parents raised me really well to see people without prejudice and to love people without prejudice. And I would say that part of me fell into that trap of not knowing how to guard my heart because I learned my flaws of what it means to love people without prejudice, but still have discernment, guard your heart, be able to say no. And so that's like kind of a different conversation, but we can always, talk about those things. But those are things I learned about myself. Like we always have pros and cons to our strengths, and our weaknesses can always become a strength formed as it grows through something. And I personally, I'm very pro-life because I'm very pro-people, and I'm very pro-love. And so that is why I'm pro-life, because I value people regardless of their age, their stage, and whatever society tries to label you as. God has his own label. He wants to label you as his. And so that's why I'm passionate about reaching people and them coming to know Christ, because it's like I know who you are and who God wants you to be, not the lies that have defined you throughout life and the labels that the devil wants to put on you. But I understood the hardships that women face in a whole, like, you can know something, but when you're really in that, like, it takes empathy and understanding to a whole new level when you're facing not just the struggle of what the situation is, but the misunderstandings and the narratives and the lies that come with it, especially when you're in a culture and community, church, religion that is supposed to be very supportive and very there for you. And so for me, it was a hard aspect because I was a college student, a Bible college student, when all this happened. And I was not able to say the truth of what was going on because I was in an abusive relationship. And so I was kind of the woman with the scarlet letter, even though I'd only had one boyfriend and hadn't been with other guys at college. And I know that other girls had been with many guys at college. But I was the one who was pregnant. So I was the one who talked about, but they didn't know how that happened. But the thing is that the church and Christians, they tout the pro-life views and pro-life values, but they're also the very reason why a lot of people do want to have an abortion, because we make it like you need to hide your sin or you're going to be shamed and shunned by us. And that's completely opposite of the message that's completely opposite of who God is, as well as the message that the church and the Bible say. And we have to be able to have those hard conversations of, are we truly being the church? And if we want to encourage and empower women to be pro-life and embrace their child, are we going to be there to help them and love them and be there practically in the ways that they, like, I needed help with my child once I came out of that situation, and I needed grace and I needed love. And I eventually had that later on. And I feel my heart goes out to the women who don't have that. Not all women have that. And so that's why a lot of things that I do, I'm trying to always say, who are we walking alongside of in practical ways? And are we there before the problem was ever there? I always like to say that if we were out in the community and if we were intentional in people's lives more, we would be having less prayer requests at Bible study.
Wow.
Sometimes we're at so many Bible studies and so many things that we're too busy to be there for the people. But if we were there for them more, then we might not have to be praying over the situation that they find themselves in later, because we would have been that support before it ever happened, or we would have been that voice they listened to, or we would have been able to be like, oh, this was the need here. But instead they go to this other need that was there in that moment when we were absent. And I think you and I both know that, I mean, we like to be the busy church, but in a lot of ways we're absent personally as Christians. And for me, I was like, I still held fast to all my beliefs. But in that moment, it was like, if I had an abortion, all this other stuff would go away, because they wouldn't know, they wouldn't gossip, they wouldn't be saying these things. I wouldn't be the shame of the college. All this would go away. And that's the lie. Because my
Wow.
son is also like one of my greatest accomplishments, and the people that just love him, people with complete opposite values of me, are some of his greatest supporters, who were like, he's such a bright light. This world without him would be so lost in all these other ways. And
Mm,
so that never look at your present situation as though that's your future, because it's just that struggle within that moment. It's not always going to be, is what my encouragement to women would be. Because I get it. I felt all those feelings.
mm,
And if you're someone who has chosen differently, we understand and we love you, and there's forgiveness
yes.
for you. God forgives you. We are all a choice away from some kind of regret. And that's
Mm,
why, we got to do our best to walk with God daily and be there for each other, not out of a check mark off a box, but because we all need it, no matter how seasoned we are.
wow. So many good pieces of advice in there. I kind of want to talk for a minute just about what you were talking about in the church. And I've had many podcast guests lately, Christian women who've had to navigate many different hard stories. And a very similar message has been shared on these podcasts. And I think that it is so important that we as the church, the hands, the feet, we are the embodiment of who Jesus is,
Yeah.
starts coming alongside of people in ways that are different than they have been doing. I know that for me, that is one of the things that the Lord has really called me forth into, and why this podcast was started, why I started sharing my story, is because I want to have these hard conversations, because God does love you right where you're at. He understands that in your brokenness and when things happen, that we make choices and mistakes. Our brain can get very confused by the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And then, even when we're trying to do the best and do the right thing, because, like you said, there's always these voices pulling you so many different directions. And in my own story, I really had a similar situation in the fact that I was in an abusive relationship. I ended up pregnant outside of marriage, and I was in my church and I was involved, and I kept showing up because I did not want to
Mm-hmm.
hide,
Yeah.
but that is so hard to do. And then when I was faced with the ultimate decision that I had to leave my marriage because of the abuse, all the people who I had served alongside of and participated for over a decade
Yeah.
were no longer there. It was like I was there, but a stranger in the room. And it was really difficult to separate Jesus from the people who were supposed to be leading people to Jesus. And I had to really work through that. Ultimately, I did find a different church, and one that had a greater understanding of trauma and abuse, and just a different approach. But I'm so thankful that you brought that up in our conversation, because I am seeing this as a theme over and over again, that women are starting to say, we have to do this different. And I love when you say, like, if we were there when things were happening, we could avoid so many things. And I am pro-life. I understand that when these things happen and they're in a violent situation and there's all of those things, there is so much trauma to
Mm-hmm.
work through. Even if you get pregnant in a relationship like I was, and it was, there's so much stigma and those things. But what I realized is I was making decisions out of a place of hurt and trauma that was causing me to make choices that weren't in my best interest or in my children's or in my unborn child. And yet God forgives and He
Mhm.
helps me to find my true identity so that I could just do life differently and have a very close relationship with Him and be able to see that people are flawed and give them grace as well. I grew up very much like you described. I believe like forgive 70 times 7, turn the other cheek. I just wanted to love people. And that created unhealthy ways of being in relationship with people. I was in toxic relationships and I didn't understand how to love people where they're at, but also have boundaries and make sure you said, I think you used the word, was it wisdom or you said something else? Like knowing when to not keep coming back and forgiving. You can forgive. Forgive is for
Yeah,
yourself and for
you
what
can
God
guard
causes to do,
that.
but not living. Oh, discernment was the word, but
Oh,
not
yeah,
continuing to live in relationship with someone who is choosing to be harmful. And so I think that is a really great place for us to kind of just leave off this episode. And then let's come back and talk a little bit more about how our story can then bring freedom, bring healing when we've experienced for ourselves.
hmm
We get the opportunity to have these conversations and help people understand that they can have something different too. And we can also help the church in learning how to understand,
yeah,
because that's the thing is behind every person's decision is a story. And if we just look at the decision, we're missing out on the whole person and how we can actually come along and help.
yeah.
Well, tell us, Robyn, where they can find you. I'll link everything in the show notes, but let us know where people can connect with you.
You can look me up on Facebook. My handle is Robyn Loves Coffee, and it's also the same on Instagram. And my community Instagram is Stirring Embers. So that's STIRRINGEMBERS. And then you can also, if you love coffee and inspiration, sharing inspiration with others, you can also find me on both also Instagram and Facebook, Brewed GRIT. It's in like brewing of the coffee and grit, so Brewed GRIT.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that we link those. You guys come back and listen to part 2 with Robyn and hear what she's doing and be inspired to be part of making a difference in this world and using your story to help others. We appreciate you being here with us. And if this has been helpful for you, we'd love for you to share a comment, or if you know someone who could benefit from this message of encouragement, then please share it. It takes all of us to make this world a better place, and we really appreciate you doing your part too. Take care. We'll see you next time.